Welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw. We are so lucky today to have in studio with us Native American artist Don Bailey, who is in town with not one but 3 exhibits of his work. And last night there was an opening. Don, welcome to InSight.
Oh, thank you very much. Nice to be
Tell
here.
us, you had a gallery opening last night of your exhibit at the Salem Art Association?
Right. That one, the Salem Art Association will be here. Closes Sunday, and that's been here for 2 months. And then last night's reception was at the Convention Center, and that show will be here through the end of September.
Yes, and we're looking at a beautiful program for that.
Right, they did a great job.
It's called America Replated, and the paintings are going to be up from June 6th to September 27th. At the Salem Convention Center. I went to the Level 2 gallery exhibit of that, and we're going to talk about that because I was really rather moved by those images and those paintings of yours. Can you tell us a little about yourself? You were born in 1954 and raised on the Hoopa Valley Reservation in Northern California. What was that like there?
Well, what I remember, I moved away when I was around 9 years old. But what I remember with my family was it was more of a insular, really a strict community, and had a lot of still adhered to a lot of the cultural ways. And for the older people, which I never really understood, they still spoke our language. My mom never bothered to give me an inclination that I should learn it for some reason or another. But I think that was a different time period then. But I remember, I guess one of the things I do take away from living there was how beautiful it was and still is, for that matter. And how beautiful our dances were and are today. And they're so meaningful, and they are so different from what you see in the Pacific Northwest or the Plains. A totally different scenario, and what we believe in. And I'll give the example would be we don't dance for prizes or anything like that. It's strictly for our tribe, our neighboring tribes, period, and it's mostly world renewal type of dances. So,
what do you mean by that?
Every 2 years there's a white deerskin dance, and that's about world renewal, and that's about getting together with your neighbors even if you don't get along with them. We're talking about like tribal neighbors, stuff like this. And you get rid of the bad feelings if you've had any, or vice versa. And you sing and dance and pray that all this bad energy will go away. The other rituals would be praying for the new seasons of the acorn and the salmon run and stuff that sustains our culture, our people.
When you speak of your neighbors, the Yurok's, there was a good trade agreement between you and them.
Right.
For example, they were closer to fishing.
Right. Oh, yeah. In fact, we got a lot of our canoes and boats from them. They made them. The cedar dugout ones, actually, they were burnt out. But you have Karuk up north by Shasta, Miwok, and Yurok. So it was all a trade community. But that didn't necessarily mean every tribe got along. And so sometimes there were, bad blood for some reason or another. So our dances and their dances also have this communal type thing where you put all that aside. You put all that aside and you pray and dance for getting along with one another again. And it's like a world renewal. It's like, okay, you refresh yourself. for the better part of the whole society, culture. So.
You told me before the program that there was a kind of a way that you learned to be, and it made you feel, as a young person, kind of introverted because of a sense of, well, children were to be seen and not heard. Was that
right? Yeah, that was kind of the culture that I grew up in. I'm not saying that everybody grew up that way on the valley, but I did in my particular case. I came from a one-parent situation, so it was more like all the relatives raising me, not just one person. But the bottom line about that, a lot of the times, was that you're better off to be seen and not heard. You speak only when you're spoken to. So there wasn't an outlet for questioning a lot of things, and I don't recall growing up having very much, if any, reading material that around our house. What little there was, I couldn't read, but I sure could look and decipher what these pictures were. I think we're talking about. So I became at that point, I think, really visual, more visual than I was aware of, you know. So. But
somebody became aware of it when you were much younger.
Yeah. When I went to grade school, I think it was second or third grade. We had art time, I guess, where you could draw and do whatever. And one afternoon, the teacher said, "You want to come with me?" And we're going down to the principal's office. And I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong or what happened, what this was about. Anyway, we got into the principal's office, and the principal took a drawing of mine, and he said, "Is this yours?" And I said, "Yes, it is. Of course it is." So he congratulated me on doing a great job on it. And I was just stunned. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say, thank you or anything. I was just thinking, thank God I'm not in trouble, So, but from then on, that was one thing I could do. I mean, I think back to that drawing today sometimes, and it reminds me of a complicated underpass in Portland where we live, and how I came to draw that I'll never know. But I think that was the beginning right then and there, and I thought there must have been some kind of a communication thing that I wanted to do. I didn't know what it was. So I think that's kind of the backbone that I've always had an inkling towards art. Never used to like to draw that much until I got into college, actually.
Where did you go to college?
I went to, first I went to Western Oregon, Western Oregon University. They call it now. Back then it was Oregon College of Education, OCE, yeah. And then after that, I taught for several years at Shemawa Indian School. And at that time, they wanted you to get a fifth year art master's. So I went back and I got accepted at the University of Oregon for a master's in fine arts. It was a 2-year program, and I lasted 1 year. I was dismayed with the program, so I went back and taught, and then I thought, I need to get this master's. So I went back and I got my master's in art education at U of O. And then I continued teaching at Shemawa.
You taught at Shemawa Indian School for 40 years.
Oh, I know. When you say that, it seems like a long time. Yeah.
Shemawa Indian School is the nation's oldest running and continuously running Indian school, federally funded, in existence.
Right, right.
Why were you there? What made you stay so long?
You know, I was recruited to go there my senior year in college. There happened to be a lady in my sculpture class who was the wife of the superintendent at the time. And she said, "What are you going to do after you graduate? And you want to be a teacher, right?" And I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "Why don't you come out and take a look at our school?" I'd never been to a boarding school before. I didn't know, because I grew up in the public system. And so I was offered a job before I graduated. And the reason I think, the reason I know I've stayed so long is because of the different nations represented at the school. Some years we'd have over 70 different nations represented from all over. And I learned so much culture-wise from each of these kids, these peoples. And so it was a pan-Indian experience.
What do you mean? What did they teach you?
Well, for instance, about this, let's take the Apache, Southwest. Linguistically, they're the same as Hoopa, believe it or not, speaking Athabascan, same language. But their dances are totally different. They have a kashari, and some of those students who'd come up and go to school, they retain those dances, and in the auditorium, we'd go down there sometimes, and they demonstrate those dances for the whole school, and it was like that. So it was like one culture sharing with another culture. I've had one. I can still remember one student saying, "I didn't know these other Indians did that," and I just cracked me up. And it's like, you know, kids growing up on reservations, you are still in a vacuum. You're not necessarily knowledgeable about other cultures, native cultures. So when kids went to Chamawa, you can imagine them being exposed to other nations. So one of the things they had to learn, whether they were neighboring tribes butting heads sometimes, is that you have to get along. You have to get along. That's number one. But for me, it was about the students and the culture learning.
The purpose of these schools was one from the government that was clearly intended to, if not strip Native Americans of their native identity, but to assimilate them into Western culture.
Right. Yeah, that was the initial philosophy of the whole system, is assimilation, Christianize, making them speak English. Do not let them speak their own language, let alone do their own cultural dances, their own praying. And that went on for many, many years. And the philosophy has changed over the years because our whole population has changed over the years in the United States. For instance, Chamawa used to be known, like the rest of them, as an industrial boarding school. And then after 1945, you know, with the advent of the GI Bill and stuff, all of a sudden it was the vocational school. So the philosophy changed from, okay, you don't have to learn a vocation. Maybe, just maybe, you can be college-oriented now. It's taken the government so long to realize that and promote Native Americans at the boarding schools instead of doing menial tasks, labor, that actually educational direct now. So my last 20 years there, I've seen more kids go on to higher education than ever before, and I think that's a good thing. that the school has done. And that's totally different from the philosophy and how the schools were started out years ago. When you had the government coming and taking kids from their parents and saying you have to, go to these boarding schools.
That was the larger image of America at the time. All started much earlier in the 19th century with manifest destiny.
Right. Yep. That's I think one thing that started it all right there. And then, because if you have a group of people, a philosophy that says, if you want to land and the people do not speak English or not Christian, then it's your divine right to take it over. So therefore, these people, you are more or less in charge of. You do, you push them back and push them back, and put them on reservations. And that's what happened. That's a big portion of that.
You've said, when talking about your art, that you want to kind of shake up people's perceptions, or really shake them up to understand the true history and the effect of manifest destiny. And let's talk about that a minute, because in looking at your 8 images in Replated, myself the other day, they were compelling and they were disturbing, and they told a story. And what is that story with each of these pictures? Can we start with one that really affected me? Full disclosure, a woman holding the hand of a little child who looks distraught, angry, confused, sad, and terrified.
Right. I think if anything, that's probably one of the most simplest one of my paintings to get into without much fanfare, because it's so direct. If you look at the background, the paper, they're all documents from between Washington, D.C. and Chemawa regarding the school and what was going on at the school. If you read that, any of those, the writings in there, they're official writings, by the way. I just copied them from the National Archives. And then, yes, you have this Cheyenne woman and her daughter. And so that is about the presumption that, she too, when she gets a little bit older perhaps, being taken away from the mother and having to go to this boarding school. And in this instance, those papers were directly tied to Chemawa. So, and I guess that's the other thing I want to stress also. Some of my paintings are harder than others to get into. I can explain, like I did last night, about convenience. There's so many facets of that. But I also said, this woman redacted is not that hard to get into. It's right in your face. So if you know about boarding schools, and you know what happened, you know about manifest destiny, you know about reservations, it's right there. So it's something you can feel, but I don't think it's something that you need to really contemplate, other than the fact that, yes, this is what happened,
Tell us about convenience. First of all, it's a beautiful, beautiful painting, and it has almost a sense of humor in it. with the shoes that one of them is wearing, they're obviously tennis shoes.
Yeah.
And lace-ups, but it's not funny. It's not funny. It's a grim reality. What was this? Well,
first of all,
about?
I'm going to start from what you just said here, because the objects that you see in here for the one woman with the young girl with the sewing machine, the Singer sewing machine, and she has Chuck Taylor tennis shoes on, contemporary, right? In the left-hand corner, the background of these flowers, well, that's from the 60s. That's Andy Warhol. And then you have several other pop art that's in the painting itself. But this original photograph was 1897 in the Rosebud Reservation it was a day school. It wasn't a bureau school. It's a day school. And so you had these girls learning how to sew, and then you have a matron in the background watching over the girls. So I wanted to put these contemporary and pop images in there to kind of make the viewer going, what is going on here? And then on top of that, you have these star quilts up on the right-hand side. Within the star quilts, you see a man and a woman. It could be a grandfather, grandmother, and uncle, or parents that perhaps these girls are related to. Okay, so that in itself is another narrative. And then the funny part for me, which I didn't bring up last night, I should have, on the left-hand corner, is a little boy at a blackboard, and he's doing a simple math, 1 + 1 = 2, but he juxtapose on the right-hand side is Albert Einstein. So that's my little thing about, where's the education here? You're making these girls do, manual work here. And then lastly, of course, none of these things were in the original photograph. But the last thing was, I asked the audience last night, I said, they're sewing on this flag. Do you think that flag was in the original? Of course it wasn't. So that was my little spin on the government itself right there. And I also made a note that at the first time I showed this painting in Portland at Blackfish, there was a person there that, when her comment was, "What a wonderful patriotic painting this is," and that was so far from the truth. But it's just, you let things like go. I mean, you can only spoon feed people so much, and then after a while, if they don't get it, they don't get it. But that's my take on what I was doing. Yeah, and you'll have, the original. I'll show you the original. Yeah.
Reflecting upon your 40 years with teaching at the Chemawa Indian School, what most often do you think were the questions that were asked of you? Oh. Was there any kind of consistency to all those years? What people wanted to know, students wanted to know of you?
Yeah. The one that was always it'd show up every year, sometime during the year, and it usually was when a student or some students got frustrated with what they were doing, or how I was looking at their work, whether it be drawing or painting or pottery, whatever. And they always come back to you, and they'd ask, well, if you're an artist, an art teacher, do you do art? Can you draw? Can you paint? And so, yes, I'd have to go draw with them sometimes, or sometimes I'd even bring a canvas in for my advanced students and paint in front of them and show them my process and how I was doing things, and so after I'd done that and shown them that, yes, I'm an artist, this is what I do, then they listened to it a little more, then going, oh, okay, well, maybe he can draw a little bit. so
What were you trying to tell them about the importance of art itself? What should be in their minds when they're even considering doing work of art? The ultimate process. What is it to lead to?
Oh, I think for me, and this is what I tried to instill on it, is the bottom line has always been what's inside of you that you are trying to communicate, and how best can you do that. So when I developed for the juniors or for the advanced students, the idea, which a lot of them just did not like, critiquing. You have to ask your peer, your neighbor, if you have a drawing or a painting, what was your idea? What were you trying to put across here? What was the idea you were trying to communicate? And they had to be truthful, and they had to be positive, nothing negative. But so I think the idea of what's inside of you, if you have something that you want to feel and you want to communicate that, what's the best way to do it, and how do you do that? So it's just not a matter of mechanics. It's a lot more than that, you know.
When I was looking at the 8 images are in Replated, I want to remind viewers what plating is.
Oh, yeah, that was the terminology, especially after the Civil War. You had these people coming out west to photograph the Wild West period, and the people who lived there, Native American people. And they had these clumsy tripods with glass plates on them, and it's amazing to me on how they did that. I mean, these were huge mechanisms and plates with harsh chemicals that was not easy to get around. I mean, you know, you talk about inconveniences of not having you know, roads or anything like that, let alone ways to carry it safely. And half these photographers were scared of Native people anyway, so that made it even you know, worse. But so my idea was, you know, it's just like they wanted to create their own, for whatever reason, narrative. So when I look at these black and white archival photos that they took, I'm kind of replating what their original, whatever their concept was, I'm putting my own spin on it now. And so that's what I mean by America Replated. I'm replating what they did. So. But
that's a very important concept, the idea that they did things for their own vision without, and one of the drivers of that was that they figured that it's either now or never,
right.
Because the Native Americans were a vanishing species, as one put it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was like what we talked about earlier. You know, if you have manifest destiny, and then you lead to the reservations, and then you lead to boarding schools. You know, famous photographer who was sponsored by, I believe, a railroad or a bank person, Edward Curtis. He wanted to do all these volumes of the vanishing race because he thought, as a lot of people did, if you round up all these Native Americans and you put them on reservations, well, then that population is slowly dying out. And they kind of thought, you know, I want to capture that before this all happens. I mean, which totally wasn't the cause. You know, for sure. I mean, it never worked out that way on what their thinking was. But they went so far as to take pictures, not just Curtis, but others, of the Indians in different costumes and other than what they were supposed to be in, or different settings they'd put them in. So you know, the motivations weren't clear, but the one thing it was just an excuse to say this is a vanishing race, you know. It was convenient.
You've also invited people to come up with their own story. Yes, here's the one that I am communicating, but pay attention to what these pictures, these paintings that I have evoke in you, and what it tells you. Have you had people tell you what these pictures have meant to them?
Yeah, when you're talking about that, it kind of conjures up what a person came in. I had a show last fall at Blackfish, and the painting was entitled, I think it's at the library. It's at the library now. It's called Airport, and it's about a woman on the left-hand side, and she's looking down like a pathway, and there's a DC-3 airplane sitting on the tarmac, of an older airport, okay? So it's just entitled, she's a traditional Pueblo woman, so it's just titled airport, period. So you don't know, it has 3 figures, and they're all the same figure, but they gradually get smaller. There's only 3, and they kind of vanish to the right. So, the question would be, is she waiting for this person to arrive, or watching them leave, or what is the story behind this traveling? Are they coming or going? And what is she wishing? Okay. So I had a person come in and tell me he thought it was some kind of a hologram effect, and he says, what airport is this? I've been to so many airports in the United States, I don't recognize this airport. And I said, well, you look fairly young, so maybe you haven't. It's 1955 Albuquerque Airport. That's where the photograph was taken of that part of the, you know. The DC-3 wasn't there. I put it there. He goes, I don't know. I just don't remember. So I got a kick out of that. But he also wanted to interject the feeling he got from the colors of the walkway down where these 3 persons were standing. You know, to him, it was like, it wasn't a real painting, you know. And that's fine. That's fine. It kind of makes me chuckle inside. And like you say, it's their own narrative. That's fine with me, you know. I give it a title and I paint it, and if people want, I can explain it a little bit. But, you know, after that, it's theirs too. Yeah.
I had an experience of your painting, just a funny feeling. It was called Not Your Father's Hat, in part of this Replated exhibit. And as I looked at it, I kept thinking, this is kind of a really important story to hear you tell maybe part of your own in that picture.
Well, it's man taking a break sitting on an old-fashioned saddle. And that question was asked about the painting last night also. When you first look at the painting, you look at him and he's resting there and he has a smoke. Down below him on his right-hand side is his actual hat. He's wearing this Western hat, cowboy hat. He is a performer. Maybe Buffalo Bills, you know, he's a native performer. So the question last night was asked, there are horses and there it looks like part of a person, but the person is cut out in the background. Is that a mirage, or is that, what's going on there? And so what it is he's probably thinking about his own traditions. He's locked between the old culture he comes from and what he's doing now for these white people. He's performing, right? If you see a horse or remnants of a person in the background, that's him dreaming about the old times or the old friends, what used to be, maybe. So he's thinking, you know, I don't know, I have to live in 2 worlds now. Which is my hat? So that's what that's about. Yeah.
Do you think America is ever to understand, let alone accept, the true history of the conquest, if you will, of this country and the taking of the lands of those who lived here? Do you think, and how they did it, do you think that there's hope that perhaps it could be taught in schools without trying to minimize it?
I would say in my short years on this earth, I would positively, I would hope so. I know for a fact that even in my own art that I've run across comments about people not quite understanding my own art, thinking it was too native and too much that I'm stepping on the government, the bureau, and in doing so, that represents white people or whatever, the other side, not native people. And I've had, not directly at me, but I just overheard people make comments about, I'll give you an instance. If I display the American flag in just black and white, or I paint it upside down and I put it at somebody's feet, that expresses my distress with a situation, period. And it's something I truly believe in, and it's something I'm not going to take back. So to answer your question, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, that everybody can accept the truth about Native Americans and our history. But I am positive, as far as the outlook, that I wish that we'd have a good start. I don't know what's in the content about the tribes wanting this to happen in all the schools and being taught. I wish them luck. I really do.
Well, certainly in Oregon in 2017, there was a passage of a bill into law which has mandated that kind of history taught from kindergarten through 12th grade,
right.
A true history of the tribal nations here and with America. And I understand that the 9 confederated tribes all had a hand in helping with that. Your thoughts? Would that be perhaps helpful in this direction?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I'm all for it. I think it's a positive step in the right direction. It's something that I think all students need to be aware of. It's just like, just because the United States is ashamed of slavery and black history, and some people want to say it didn't exist, or we don't want that taught in schools because it could make some people feel bad. That's too bad. That's what happened. That's the way it was. So there's no need to shovel that underneath the carpet or whatever. That has to be out there. Just like Native history should be out there.
Thank you, Don. I've so appreciated this time with you.
Oh, thank you.
I invite people to do their own investigation of what we've been talking about. It's out there, it is around, and you can learn. I am continuing to learn myself. But in the meantime, go see your artwork. Tell us where it is now, where we can learn more. You have a website.
Yeah, I have a website. It's hoopapaint.com. 2 shows now are concurrently at the Convention Center here in Salem and at the library. And in October at Blackfish Gallery in Portland, I'll have a solo show, which I'm working on pieces now for that. So, keeping busy.
You are kept busy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on InSight. I would love to have you back sometime.
Oh, sure. You bet. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.